A man sold the most valuable inheritance in human history for a bowl of soup. Romans chapter 9 verse 13 records the divine verdict issued over his bloodline before either twin had drawn a single breath. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. It is not a metaphor, it is a prenatal declaration of war. The Edomites, the descendants of Esau, refused Moses' safe passage in the wilderness. They cheered and looted as Jerusalem burned to the ground, and then one of them changed his name, converted to Judaism by force, infiltrated the highest levels of political power, and was crowned King of the Jews by the Roman Senate. His first act against the true King of the Jews was to order the massacre of every baby boy in Bethlehem. The war that started in a mother's womb followed the Messiah to his manger. How did one man's bowl of soup become a 2,000-year war against God? How did an Edomite end up wearing the crown of Judah? And the most haunting question of all, where are the Edomites today? Because the Bible says their story is not finished yet. This is the complete file on the Edomites. Subscribe to Bible Origins. Let us begin. Rebecca is pregnant. The pregnancy is violent. The babies are fighting inside her. She goes to God and asks why this is happening. God answers with one of the most extraordinary prenatal prophecies in all of Scripture. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Before either child has done anything good or evil, God has already announced the hierarchy. This is not favoritism. This is foreknowledge. Esau emerges first, red, covered in hair like a garment. The Hebrew word is admoni, ruddy, red. His name Esau means hairy, but the identity that would define his descendants came from another word, Edom, red. He was born red. His land would be red. His legacy would be red, and every time the color red appears in this story, it marks another chapter in the bloodline's destruction. Jacob follows, gripping Esau's heel. His name means heel grabber, supplanter, 2 brothers, 1 womb, 1 war already begun. Years later, Esau comes in from the field exhausted. Jacob is cooking lentil stew, red stew. The text is specific. Esau says, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew." The Hebrew repeats the word ha-adom, the red. The text is screaming the color at you. That is why he was also called Edom. Jacob names his price, the birthright. The firstborn's covenant rights, the double inheritance, the patriarchal authority, and the bloodline to the Abrahamic promise. Esau's response is one of the most consequential sentences in human history. I am about to die. What good is the birthright to me? He was not about to die. He was hungry. He traded an eternal covenant for a bowl of red soup. The text delivers the verdict with surgical contempt. So Esau despised his birthright. He did not lose it, he threw it away, and the color was already telling you the cost. Genesis 27. Jacob, coached by Rebekah, deceives blind Isaac and steals the patriarchal blessing. Esau arrives, discovers the theft, and lets out a loud and bitter cry. Isaac's hands are empty. The blessing is irrevocable. Esau's vow is immediate. The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. But here is the detail that makes everything that follows even more tragic. Years later, Jacob returns from exile. He is terrified, certain that Esau is coming to kill him. He sends gifts ahead. He divides his family into groups in case of attack. He wrestles with God all night and walks away limping. And then Genesis 33 verse 4 happens. Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. The brothers reconciled. Esau forgave. They buried their father Isaac together. The personal wound between 2 men was healed, but the national wound was not. The fathers made peace. The nations they birthed never would. And that is what makes every chapter that follows so devastating, because it did not have to go this way. Esau did not lose a family argument. He lost the covenant bloodline to the coming Messiah. And the rage of that loss did not die with one man. It became a nation. It became a fortified kingdom carved into red stone cliffs. It became a 1,000-year military insurgency against the people of God. The nation born from Esau's fury took his color as its name: Edom, the Red. Esau settles in the rugged mountain terrain of Seir, south and east of the Dead Sea, in modern-day southern Jordan. Genesis 36 records his descendants, his chiefs, and his kings. This was not a scattered tribe. This was a kingdom with an organized monarchy before Israel even had a king. Towering red sandstone cliffs rising hundreds of meters from the desert floor. Narrow canyon passes where a handful of archers could hold off an army of thousands. The capital, the city the Bible calls Selah, meaning rock, later known as Petra, was carved directly into the crimson rock face. Red stone, red earth, red walls. The color followed them everywhere. God described their arrogance through the prophet Obadiah. You who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? Though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down. They believed their geography made them untouchable. They were wrong. Edom controlled the King's Highway, one of the most critical trade routes in the ancient world, connecting Egypt to Mesopotamia. Every caravan carrying spices, incense, gold, and copper had to pass through Edomite territory. They taxed everything. They grew obscenely wealthy. Geography had made them rich, and wealth had made them arrogant. The red cliffs that made them militarily impregnable also made them commercially dominant. They sat at the intersection of the ancient world and charged the world to pass through. Moses, leading 2 million people out of Egypt, sends a humble diplomatic request to the king of Edom, his own cousin, asking for safe passage through their territory. He offers to stay on the main road, pay for water, and touch nothing. Edom refuses, then refuses again, and marches out with a massive army to block them. Israel's own blood relative slams the door in their face. This sets the template for every interaction that follows. Saul wages war against Edom. David conquers Edom and stations garrison across the territory. His general Joab spends 6 months systematically killing every Edomite male he can find. The violence is industrial. An Edomite prince named Hadad, a child survivor of that campaign, escapes to Egypt, is raised in Pharaoh's palace, marries into Egyptian royalty, and returns years later as a divinely raised adversary against Solomon. Even God's punishments used Edom. Edom revolts against Judah repeatedly across the following centuries. They are never fully subdued, never content to be conquered. King Amaziah strikes down 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt and captures their fortress capital. But the conquest is temporary. Edom claws back. During the reign of Ahaz, Edom invades Judah again and carries off captives. 800 years after Esau's vow, his descendants are still raiding, still fighting, still bleeding Israel from the south. And from Esau's bloodline came another name the Bible would never forget. Genesis 36 records that Esau's grandson was named Amalek, the ancestor of Israel's most vicious and relentless predator. The nation that ambushed the sick and the children at the rear of the Exodus column. The bloodline that produced Haman, who nearly exterminated the entire Jewish race in the book of Esther. Amalek was Edom's grandson, the same root, the same rage, But that is a story for another video. For 800 years, Edom bled Israel from the south, raid after raid, revolt after revolt, generation after generation. But nothing the Edomites did in 8 centuries of border warfare compares to what they did on the single worst day in Israel's history. The day Jerusalem was destroyed and Edom danced. 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylonian siege army has surrounded Jerusalem for nearly 2 years. The city is starving. Lamentations describes mothers boiling their own children for food. The walls finally breach. Babylonian soldiers pour through the gaps. The temple, Solomon's masterpiece, the dwelling place of God's glory on earth, is looted, stripped of its gold, and burned to black rubble. The Ark of the Covenant disappears from history. The surviving population is chained and marched to Babylon. When Babylon rolled through the gates, Edom did not stand neutral. They did not watch from a distance. They participated. Psalm 137 verse 7 preserves the raw and anguished cry of Jewish exiles weeping by the rivers of Babylon. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. The book of Obadiah is the shortest book in the entire Old Testament, 21 verses, and every single one of them is aimed at Edom. This is not a prophecy about many nations. This is God writing an entire book to prosecute a single defendant. Read the charges like a district attorney reading an indictment. On the day you stood aloof while strangers carried off his wealth, you watched. You should not have looked down on your brother in the day of his misfortune. You gloated. You should not have marched through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster. You entered the city while it burned. You should not have seized their wealth in the day of their disaster. You looted your own brother's house. You should not have waited at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives. You hunted the refugees. You should not have handed over their survivors in the day of their trouble. You delivered the survivors to the enemy, and Obadiah was not the only voice that testified. The prophet Amos, writing independently, delivered his own searing verdict. He pursued his brother with a sword, stifling all compassion because his anger raged continually and his fury flamed unchecked. 3 phrases, each one a conviction, pursued his brother with a sword. The violence was relentless, stifling all compassion. Every natural instinct of kinship was deliberately and consciously suppressed. His fury flamed unchecked. This was not a moment of rage. This was a furnace that burned for centuries, and no one in the bloodline ever tried to put it out. This was not warfare. This was a family member kicking down your door while your house was already on fire, robbing your children, and then handing the ones who escaped to the men who lit the match. Every act Obadiah describes violates the ancient Near Eastern code of kinship. Edom was blood. Esau was Jacob's twin. The betrayal was not political, it was fraternal. Cain and Abel played out on a national scale. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 10. Because of the violence against your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame. You will be destroyed forever. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 15. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head. This is not a warning. This is sentencing. God is closing the case on Edom. God sentenced Edom to permanent destruction. But Edom did not die. It did something far more dangerous. It shapeshifted, changed its name, changed its religion, changed its address, moved inside the walls of Judah. And the man who emerged from that infiltration, wearing the crown of David, sitting on the throne of the covenant, became the most paranoid, brilliant, and murderous king in the history of the Promised Land. After the Babylonian exile, Edom's mountain fortress began to crumble from within. Nomadic Arab tribes, the Nabateans, pushed the Edomites out of Petra and Seir. The red cliffs they had boasted would never fall were taken by desert nomads. God had promised through Obadiah, "From there, I will bring you down." The displaced Edomites migrated westward into the southern Judean Negev. They settled in and around Hebron, Abraham's own burial ground. The Greeks renamed them. The old name was retired. They were now called Idumeans. Same family, same blood, same ancient fury. New label. Around 125 BC, the Hasmonean king John Hyrcanus I conquered the Idumeans and issued an ultimatum: convert to Judaism or leave. Circumcision at sword point. Entire populations were absorbed into the Jewish nation, not by faith, not by conviction, but by the blade. Josephus records this in detail. The Edomites became Jews in name. But the bloodline, the spiritual trajectory of Esau, was now operating inside the walls. Within one generation of that forced conversion, an Idumean family clawed their way to the highest levels of Judean politics. Antipater, the Idumean, became the chief advisor to the Hasmonean rulers. His son, maneuvered between warring Jewish factions, traveled to Rome, and in 40 BC, the Roman Senate granted him a title that should have belonged only to the line of David. His name was Herod, and they called him King of the Jews, an Edomite, a descendant of Esau, the bloodline that God said would serve the younger, the nation that danced while Jerusalem burned. That bloodline was now sitting on the throne of David, wearing the crown of Judah, ruling the covenant nation. The supplanted had stolen the crown. Herod was brilliant and monstrous in equal measure. He rebuilt the temple on a scale that dwarfed Solomon's original. Not out of devotion, but out of political calculation to pacify a population that knew he had no legitimate right to the throne. He was an Edomite playing dress-up in Jewish robes, and he compensated with architecture. He murdered his own wife Mariamne, a Hasmonean princess he had married to legitimize his reign. He murdered her grandfather. He drowned her brother in a swimming pool. He executed 3 of his own sons on suspicion of conspiracy. Augustus Caesar reportedly said, "It is safer to be Herod's pig than Herod's son," because Herod, as a nominal Jew, would not eat pork, but he had no problem killing his children. The paranoia was total, and it reached its absolute peak when foreign astrologers walked into Jerusalem and asked a single question: "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews?" Matthew chapter 2 verse 16. Herod orders the execution of every male child in Bethlehem 2 years old and under. An Edomite king, a descendant of Esau, the man who lost the birthright, ordering the systematic murder of infants to eliminate the seed of Jacob, the ultimate heir of the covenant, the Messiah. The war that began when 2 babies fought inside Rebekah's womb, the elder grasping, the younger reaching, had followed the covenant bloodline across 60 generations, through 800 years of border wars, through the burning of Jerusalem, through a forced religious conversion, through a political takeover of the throne of David, and arrived at the exact manger where Jesus Christ slept. Esau's rage had not diminished. It had refined itself into a crown-wearing, temple-building, baby-killing machine. And it nearly succeeded. Herod died in 4 BC. A gruesome death. Disease consumed him from the inside. His sons carved up the kingdom and fought over the scraps. The dynasty collapsed within a generation. And then, within 70 years of the birth of Jesus, Rome destroyed Jerusalem and scattered every person inside its walls across the known world. The Jews went into exile, but the Edomites, the Idumeans, who had been nominal Jews for barely a century, simply vanish. No nation, No territory, no census, no name. They disappear from the historical record entirely. The question this video asks, where are the Edomites now, is a question that history cannot answer, but the Bible can. After the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Idumeans ceased to exist as a recognizable group. There is no separate Edomite exile, no surviving community, no ethnic marker, no nation on any map bearing their name. Josephus records that during the Jewish war against Rome, 20,000 armed Idumeans stormed into Jerusalem and committed some of the most savage factional violence of the entire siege, butchering Jewish priests and civilians inside the temple courts. Then Titus and his legions burned everything to the ground, and the Idumean identity drowned in the rubble along with everything else. 3 theories have emerged to explain where they went. The first is total absorption. The mainstream scholarly position holds that after Hyrcanus's forced conversion, the Edomites were swallowed into the Jewish population over several generations. By 70 AD, there was no meaningful ethnic boundary remaining. They simply ceased to be a people. The second is the rabbinic code. In Talmudic and later rabbinic literature, the name Edom became a coded reference, first for Rome, then for Christendom broadly. This was not a genetic claim. It was typological. The rabbis saw Rome as inheriting the spiritual character of Esau. Whether this is prophetic insight or literary pattern is debated. The third is the prophetic view. The Bible does not describe Edom's story ending with a quiet demographic absorption. The prophets describe something far more dramatic, a final reckoning that has not yet occurred. Stop and consider this. No other nation in biblical history has 5 separate prophets writing against it. Not Babylon, not Assyria, not Egypt. 5 independent voices writing in different centuries from different locations, all aimed at the same target. This is not a footnote in prophecy. This is a coordinated cross-generational prosecution. Obadiah wrote an entire book, 21 verses, every one of them aimed at Edom. The sentence, "You will be destroyed forever." Amos corroborated independently. He pursued his brother with a sword, stifling all compassion, because his anger raged continually and his fury flamed unchecked. Jeremiah devoted an entire oracle to Edom's destruction in chapter 49. "I will strip Esau bare. I will uncover his hiding places so that he cannot conceal himself." God promises to expose every fortress, every cave, every refuge. The red cliffs that Edom trusted, God says he will strip them naked. Ezekiel devotes an entire chapter, chapter 35, to the destruction of Mount Seir. "Because you harbored an ancient hostility and delivered the Israelites over to the sword at the time of their calamity, I will fill your mountains with the slain." The phrase ancient hostility is devastating. God is naming the grudge for what it is, not a political dispute, but an inherited, cultivated, generational hatred that never once sought reconciliation. And Malachi, the very last prophet of the Old Testament, records God speaking directly. "Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Yet I have loved Jacob, but Esau I have hated, and I have turned his hill country into a wasteland. They may build, but I will demolish. They will be called the wicked land, a people always under the wrath of the Lord." God is not speaking in past tense. He is issuing a permanent, ongoing verdict. Then Isaiah sees something, a figure approaching from the east. The vision stops him cold. Who is this coming from Edom, from Bozrah, with his garments stained crimson? Who is this, robed in splendor, striding forward in the greatness of his strength? The figure answers, "I have trodden the winepress alone. From the nations no one was with me. I trampled them in my anger and trod them down in my wrath. Their blood spattered my garments, and I stained all my clothing red. from the beginning to the end. Esau was born red. The stew was red. Petra's cliffs are red. Herod's hands were red with innocent blood. And the final figure in the Edomite saga comes from Bozrah, the ancient capital of Edom, with garments stained crimson. The color that defined this bloodline from Genesis to the prophets is the color that closes their file. Many theologians identify this figure as the returning Messiah, and the location is not Jerusalem. It is Edom. The final confrontation between Jacob's God and Esau's legacy takes place on Edom's own soil. Obadiah 1 verse 18, "The house of Jacob will be a fire and the descendants of Joseph a flame. The house of Esau will be stubble, and they will set it on fire and destroy it." There will be no survivors from the house of Esau. No survivors. The verdict is total, and according to the prophets, it is still unfulfilled. The Bible says the final chapter of the war that began in Rebekah's womb has not been written yet. Let me step out of the history for a moment. You just spent 25 minutes tracing a bloodline that lost everything, and the origin of that loss, the single moment where it all went wrong, was not a battle. It was not a political miscalculation. It was not God being unfair. It was a bowl of soup. Esau was hungry, not dying. Hungry, and he looked at the birthright, the covenant of Abraham, the promise of land, of descendants, of the Messiah himself, and he said 5 words that sealed the fate of his entire bloodline. What good is that to me right now? And here is what makes that sentence so dangerous. It was reasonable, the stew was hot, the birthright was invisible, the hunger was now, the covenant was someday. Esau did not feel like he was making a catastrophic decision. He felt like he was being practical. What birthright are you selling right now? Not in some dramatic one-time collapse. Right now, this week. What eternal thing has God placed in your hands? A calling, a purpose, a relationship he assigned to you that you are quietly trading away because the temporary thing in front of you is closer, louder, and more immediately satisfying. The career that pays well but costs you your family. The relationship that feels good but pulls you from your assignment. The comfort that asks nothing of you while your calling sits in the corner collecting dust. These are not dramatic choices, they are Tuesday choices, and Esau made his on an ordinary afternoon when he was just a little hungry. Maybe it is not one catastrophic choice, maybe it is the slow, daily trade. Every morning you wake up and choose the urgent over the important, the comfortable over the obedient, the bowl of soup over the birthright. And you whisper Esau's lie to yourself without even realizing it. What good is it to me right now? Hebrews chapter 12 verses 16 and 17 delivers the final verdict on Esau. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected. Even though he sought the blessing with tears, he could not change what he had done. He sought it with tears. He wanted it back, but the transaction was final. Some trades cannot be undone. Some seasons once wasted do not return. Some birthright doors once closed do not reopen. Esau discovered that with tears streaming down his face. Do not wait until you are weeping over a birthright you threw away to realize what you were holding. The Edomites had every opportunity to reconcile. When Moses asked for passage, they could have opened the road. When Jerusalem was burning, they could have opened their arms. When Herod sat on God's throne, he could have bowed to the true king. At every crossroads for 2,000 years, they chose the grudge over the grace. The birthright was never really about soup. It was about what Esau valued. And God's judgment on Edom was not arbitrary cruelty. It was the permanent consequence of a people who, generation after generation, chose bitterness over blessing. What are you choosing? right now, today. Not in an abstract theological sense. What are you actually choosing? The grudge or the grace? The bitterness or the birthright? The red bowl in front of you or the covenant above you? The ruins of Petra still stand in the Jordanian desert. Red stone, empty rooms, silent canyons where a nation that thought it was untouchable once lived. The cliffs are still there. The people are gone. The Bible's verdict was delivered, and the color red is still whispering the same warning it whispered 4,000 years ago.